Hi, and welcome to the curriculum preview for the second 6 weeks for kindergarten science. Today we're going to briefly talk about the two units that are scheduled for this 6 weeks, Unit 2, which is energy, force, and motion, and then Unit 3, which touches on seasonal plants. So before we begin, just want to remind you about a couple of key planning documents that you'll find in Forethought, and you might want to have these printed out, or if you'd rather open those up on a screen behind this video, you can pause it and refer to those. We're going to be talking about the pacing guide, referring to a couple of pieces in the unit overview, and then referring to the vocabulary on the clarifiers. So here's an overview of the pacing guide for the first of 2 units for the 6 weeks, Unit 2. And you can see that there are 2 days that are scheduled for just finishing up K.6a from the first 6 weeks. And then we move into exploring with magnets. And then we have 10 days with 2 content standards bundled with a couple of process skills. We're going to go ahead and take a little bit closer look at kind of the big ideas from the pacing guide on the next slide. So as I mentioned, you've got a couple of days in there if you need a little bit of extra time to complete K.6a from the first 6 weeks. And then as students really start to explore magnets, that's really a great time to partner with those process skills of collecting information using the notebooks and the magnet. So I have the 2 images there just to remind you that your kiddos should be using those 2 things this 6 weeks. And then as we look at the last part, you can see that these 2 standards, K.6c and D, are related, and they really do bundle nicely together when partnered with these process skills. So I'd like to take a little bit closer look at the bundling of K.6D and C. And I'd like for me to kind of show you how you might chunk this out together and how that might flow. 10 days is a long time, so if we kind of think about putting those into 2 5-day sections, that might help frame how we might approach that. So as we start to look at the first standard, we might want to talk to students about what it means to observe and describe. So again, reminding that we observe with our senses. So we see things, we feel things, we hear things, we smell things, we taste things when it's appropriate, and how we can describe those using some describing words. So once we really help them understand what these verbs are, then we can lead them into observing and describing when we're talking about the location of one object in relation to another. So this is going to be the next step into scaffolding for them to understand above, below, behind, in front of, and beside. And so as we start to get these conceptual kind of spatial concepts with the students, it'll really set the stage nicely for the next standard. So I've got just a little illustration that came from STEM Scopes. There are step-by-step scaffold pieces in the 5E to help your kids really master this as they go along. And because this is an abstract concept with some of these new kind of terms, that's why we've got a few days scheduled in for that. So after your students are really comfortable with using these words, it's going to be great for us to go into our next standard. And I can see that the first standard at the top, excuse me, there's a mistake. This should be C. K.6c. Then we're ready to go into K.6d, and now we can talk about these next 2 verbs, which is demonstrate and record. And again, it's going to be important for your kindergarten students to have some practice with what does demonstrate look like, what does demonstrate sound like, what do we do when we demonstrate, and recording. We can record with pictures, we can record us talking about something. We can record with words, with numbers. And so taking some time to really define what that means. And then we're going to demonstrate the way objects can move. And we're going to record the way objects can move. And talking about and showing them different things that we can do to hit both of those verbs. And then the last layer that we're going to add on, we're going to focus in on these particular ways that objects can move. A straight line, zigzag, up and down, back and forth, round, and fast and slow. So I think whenever you see it really chunked like this in pieces, you can see how the time frame really does fit with what we're asking students to master. These concepts do come back again in first grade, and they're very similar, although with slightly different verbs. But it is worth taking the time to really help students understand what those verbs are so they can be successful all through the year. And remember, we also had 2 process skills that were partnered with this. And I really think that if you look at these 2 concepts, I would probably, once students had mastered how to demonstrate, record, zigzag, back and forth, all of those different contexts, have them then take a look at how can they plan and conduct a simple investigation that can maybe answer a question that they come up with. So for instance, if you have used a round sphere, a ball, a basketball or a soccer ball, and you've rolled that across the floor and you've recorded how that moves, what about a football? That's shaped differently. So the students could actually come up with a plan. How can we investigate how it's going to move? And then how can we communicate those observations? And then explain why. Why did it move differently than a round ball? So again, we've got 10 days devoted for all of these concepts. Okay, so just a couple of big takeaways for the unit overview. As you start to get ready to plan for this unit, the unit overview has guiding questions. So as you're discussing some of those points, there's a specific process skill that talks about discussing and their findings, and that is a good fit for the guiding questions that we have listed. There's also a section in the unit overview called Approaches to Classroom Use, and that has some nice hints and useful tips. And then, of course, there's a list of district resources for each standard. So this was just kind of a big takeaway. Also want to just remind you that there are Ames lessons that are ordered in order of preference or categorized with notes in the unit overview. And that'll save you a little bit of time. I've done a little bit of legwork, and our curriculum team has looked at some lessons and tried to pre-plan a little bit for you. And then we also have some Delta readers and Lakeshore kits that are often mentioned in these unit overviews as well. So if you're a visual learner, this is what the unit overview looks like, and this is a visual of those things I just talked about. So just a screenshot of the standards. Here are the guiding questions. So if your students can answer these questions really using the vocabulary that you're focusing on, they're doing great towards mastering those standards. This section has the hints and tips, and then here are the standard by standard resources to help you with your specific planning. Okay, let's move into Unit 3. Unit 3 is a little mini lesson. It's about 11 days long, and it's on seasonal plants. So this will be something that's introducing fall seasonal plants, and then we'll come back to these same standards in the spring. So we have 6 days where we look at young plants and parent plants, and then the simple life cycle. And then we have 5 days for identifying the parts of plants. So let's take a look at what this looks like a little bit more in depth. There's a great connection to social studies for fall holidays, and the introduction to plants that we're using now focuses on plants such as pumpkins and corn and sunflowers and maybe tree leaves that are changing color. So the resources that are listed in the unit overview are focused more on a fall connection rather than a spring connection. So you don't have to worry about if you use a lesson now, you wouldn't be able to use it later. They're really divided out. And again, like I mentioned, we'll repeat these same standards in the spring, so they're not listed for mastery, just as an introduction. So again, this unit also has its own unit overview. And just a couple of things that are listed in there that might be helpful. This is a great time to make a class terrarium that can be used again in the spring. And there are lots of resources in there how to make very simple terrariums that you can use in your classroom. And just a couple of notes at the bottom. You can make a terrarium out of anything, but there are 2 actual terrariums that were delivered for your grade level last year. Or if you want to make one out of a soda pop bottle or any sort of container, you can make your own together. And STEMscopes actually has some suggestions for making your own terrarium with the kids, as well as some ways to use it with primary students. And that's located in the teacher toolbox. Here's just a screenshot of the unit overview. So again, it has excuse me, it has the same guiding questions, some hints and tips here, and then specific fall connections for those seasonal plants. Okay, and as we wrap up, I just want to remind you about vocabulary. I know a lot of teachers really like the picture vocabulary that's in STEM scopes. I just want to remind you, though, that the picture vocabulary section has some, but not all the vocabulary for the standard. So you'll always want to check back and make sure that you look at the clarifier. I'm going to have a screenshot of one of your standards for this 6 weeks on the screen. Those are going to be the words that really your kids are going to need to be focusing on. So those come directly from the standard. And again, if they can answer those guiding questions that are on the unit overview using some or all these words, they're going to be ready to be mastering those standards. So the final thought I want to just leave you with is, first of all, congratulations for finding the curriculum preview in Canvas. This is a brand new platform for us, so I hope you find it user-friendly. And if you found this curriculum preview, if you go back to Canvas, right underneath the link where you click to watch this video, you're going to see this graphic. And this is another level of support that we're offering for teachers. So it's called C3, and it's just a time set aside every 6 weeks for you to come and meet with your coordinators or have colleagues come together and plan or really answer any questions that you have or get clarification. It's very informal. It's come and go, and it's really driven by your needs. So whatever your needs are for your content areas, be it science, math, social studies, or ELAR, this is a time for you to have some face-to-face time with either your coordinators or colleagues. So if you're interested in that, you can head back to the Canvas site and learn a little bit more about when those are being offered and go ahead and register and workshop. Well, thanks for joining me, and best of luck this 6 weeks, and let me know if I can help you in any way.